As always, spacebrony, if you ever find this video, first off, hi! Second of all, please let me know if you want me to take this off, because I will. I do not mean any infringement. Please support the official release. Chapter 4 of A Rose is a Rose by spacebrony. Why are you here? Thade froze where he stood, poised for combat. The moonlight illuminating the castle bedroom seemed to avoid him. He appeared as a dark blotch among the long shadows. This was not going as he planned at all, without the element of surprise. No choice but now to continue, he had thought. He lashed out with a violet bolt of magic, head lowered, his horn aimed squarely at Celestia. Why are you here? Celestia repeated. Around her simmered a faint aura of light that dispersed his fist's attack like rain against an umbrella. He thrashed forward, this time striking with both magic and a front hoof. Magic was once more scattered by the aurora, while he himself sailed through it, his powerful hoof striking thin air. I will ask you once more, Celestia said patiently, now behind him. Why are you here? He turned slowly to face her. I am here to recover what's mine. I can assure you there is nothing of yours here. Whatever it is that troubles you, I'll do everything in my power to Paramount Spring, a relic you must bring, of a loved one once of now lost. Prayer of ultimate cost. To break through the wall, first the pillars must fall, retying the tether that bonds the worlds together. To finish the deed, to reveal the portal you will vitally need. Blood of an immortal. Celestia finished for him. I understand now. Child, do not call me that! He shouted, the magical force of his fury slamming the door into splinters and smashing a tabletop mirror. We are all children so as long as we exist on this world, she explained softly. The journeys we take here are few compared to those that await us in the next. Shut up with your lies! You who will live for millennia can know nothing about death! Celestia sighed. On the contrary, I know more about it than I ever wished to learn. If you really loved her, child, you would dedicate yourself to honoring her memory, instead of tarnishing it with your treacherous actions. I just want her back, he whispered, more to himself than the princess. I just want to see her again. It would be cruel to impose upon one's life by forcing them to return to this one, Celestia continued. With patience, lovers will always meet again, regardless of how many worlds lie between them. Upsetting the balance of life could have consequences far worse than you could imagine. Child, I am older than the oldest equestrian mountain. Do you think I do not miss the many friends that I have met along my path? The friends who, in the span of my ancient life, amount to no more than a passing stranger in yours? I miss them, but I do not mourn them because I know we will meet again, as all friends and lovers surely do. Thade broke down, his determination seemingly melted away by Celestia's counsel. Laska, what I give to embrace you once more. Celestia approached the weeping unicorn, embracing him under her wing. She crumpled to the floor as the hidden dagger's poison took effect. Thade smiled. She performed better than expected. If he had believed any of that ridiculous other life stupidity, perhaps it would have been moving. He held tightly to her dead weight body, summoning the strength from a long-distance teleport. Incredible, the power she has. I knew she'd best me, but her effortless defense, remarkable. He reached the required level of magical buildup. He found himself thinking once more upon Celestia's words. Complete hogwash. We are given one life, and we're expected to make every moment count. When one life is cut too short, tragically short, when it's stolen from the arms who loves her, it is his duty not to mourn and forget, but to do everything he can hold her once more. That is the sign of true love. With a flash, the unicorn and alicorn faded from the castle's room, now silent, but for the occasional tinkling of a mirror shard falling to the floor. Excerpt from Supernaturals, Glossary of Definitions, page 424. Space. Space is big. Really big. Speruncles. Speruncles are brothers of woodland creatures that mimic a voice crying for help. Spring of Magic. The Spring of Magic is the fabled source of all unicorn magic. No pony has ever proven its existence, and its location remains unknown. In old mare's tales, it is found only by lost ponies trying to find their way home. The story goes that one fateful day, a love-struck pony happened upon the spring. Spurndog. The Spurndog is a fabled being that feasts upon dreams. Literal dreams, not metaphorical dreams. Ugh! Twilight! Remind me again why you couldn't just teleport us all to the spring! Rainbow Dash whined, wiping bug guts off a wing. The swamp was full of pests, which had a knack for squishing against their flapping appendices. Twilight rolled her eyes. What was it Dash didn't understand? She only explained it 6 times. First of all, Dash, the spring contains so much magic that there'd be too much interference for an accurate teleport. Second of all, and most importantly, no pony is entirely sure where the spring is located. Supernaturals only mentions it once, explaining that we must get lost to find it. Of course, that sounds ridiculous, but they say it has no fixed location, and appears only when it chooses to appear, which is why we are trying to get lost now. Applejack sighed. Well, we certainly are off to a great start. We've been walking for hours, and all we've seen is swamp and more swamp. And I hate swamps. Got mud on my nice galoshes.
Hey, Applejack, can I pretty please have another of those yummy apple sandwiches you pet?
Asked Pinkie Pie.
My tummy's all grumbly.
Applejack was very close to losing her temper. For the last time, Pinkie, we need to save those. We haven't even been gone a single day. You've already eaten half of them.
Oh, so what you're saying is, if I did have some, you'd be mad, right? Well, then I guess I didn't eat the rest of them.
Pinkie, if I open my pack right now and don't see any apple sandwiches, you're going to have a lot more to worry about than a grumbly tummy. Look! Exclaimed Rarity.
Could you please stop your fighting? Pinkie Pie, next time remember that we don't know how long we'll be traveling, and we need all our provisions to last. Applejack, how could you threaten Pinkie Pie? If we don't get along, we won't make it to the end of day 1!
Applejack, ears lowered, turned remorsefully to Pinkie. I'm sorry I threatened you, Pinkie. I was so frustrated as all. We've been walking and seeing nothing but swamp, and we're all tired.
It's okay, Applejack. I know you didn't mean it. I'm sorry for eating all the sandwiches. I promise that if we find something to eat out here, I'll cook it right up and make it nice and tasty.
They carried on, all of them tired of travel and the monotonous swampy forest which loomed over them in every direction. All of them but one.
Oh, are you the cutest thing?
Fluttershy said, hugging a tree squirrel.
We don't have squirrels like you in Ponyville.
Every few minutes, Fluttershy was exclaiming over a new woodland creature. However, her excitement failed to spread to her friends. If anything, it increased the tension, as the only thing more frustrating than being lost in a swamp happens to being lost in a swamp while some pony is constantly giggling. Glad some pony's happy, mumbled Rainbow Dash, forced to walk because of the pesky bugs that squished against her rings. Twilight sighed.
Dash, it may not be a fun trip, but with so much on the line, we don't have much of a choice. Luna is counting on us, not to mention Celestia. Oh, I hope she's okay.
Dash peered around, ensuring that she and Twilight were out of ear's reach, then moved closer. Twilight, she began, an expression of worry upon the face so commonly cocky. Do you think everything will be okay? I mean, we're bumbling about, lost in a swamp, while Celestia is out there, somewhere. And who knows how dangerous that evil pony is. Luna says his hope of raising the dead is never going to work, and the outcome could only be disaster for every pony. What if we don't get there in time? What if we don't get there at all? Twilight chose her words carefully, so you could see the worry painted upon Dash's face. Dash, who once kicked a dragon in the head. Rainbow, whatever we're doing it right. We wouldn't have left without a plan. Sure, we're lost. She glanced about the endless murky forest. But we're supposed to be lost. It's the only way to find the spring. Supernatural says so, and that book was correct about the points of joke, wasn't it? Also, we're following Luna's instructions. Would she have let us leave if she wasn't sure we were on the right path?
Yeah, I guess you're right, Twilight. I just hope this swampy forest ends soon. Not all of us are having as much fun as Fluttershy the forest friend. She nodded towards Fluttershy, who appeared to be talking to a frog. Twilight turned to Dash, and after a moment, they both erupted into laughter.
What are y'all laughing at?
Nothing, giggled Rainbow Dash. They trotted on, pushing through the dense swamp, every step pulling them further from any semblance of direction, but also bringing them closer to the cave, to the spring.
Twilight, I really don't like caves.
Fluttershy whimpered. The one before them extended deeper than the reach of the evening's dimming light, its mouth gaping and unwelcome. We don't have a choice, Fluttershy. We're finally at the edge of this swamp, but it's getting dark and we need shelter. It's this or sleep out here, and I'm sure the nighttime creatures of this swamp are a lot less adorable than those squirrels I saw you with earlier. Dash flew forward. I'll take this one out for you. Before Twilight or any pony else could stop her, she raced off into the mouth of the cave. Her impatience is going to get us all killed one day, sighed Twilight. Moments later, a yelp echoed out of the rocky hole.
Darius!
The five sounded in unison. They ran to the mouth of the cave just as she reappeared, rubbing a bruised head.
I'm okay, guys.
Just flew into a slide wax, or what do you call it? The cave's safe. Sure is dark, though. Fluttershy's hug was caring, but her voice angry.
Don't scare us like that again, Dash.
Sorry. It's just been so long since anything exciting happened. I had to check it out. Applejack began walking into the cave. Can we all just quit the drama and get some sleep? All this mucking about in the swamp has made me mighty tired, not to mention hungry. She added, glaring at Pinky, who smiled guiltily. The others followed, and soon they were sitting on the ground around Twilight, whose horn illuminated the dark cavity. All right, we made some good progress today. Once we're clear out of the swamp tomorrow, we should move even faster. Twilight turned to Applejack. We're all low on food, but there were some edible-looking berry bushes along the path we took, and I think I saw an apple tree or two near there, too. We're almost certainly lost, so we're off to a great start. How are you all feeling? Rarity sighed.
Oh, dirty, but I've been worse. At least all that mud is good for my complexion.
Fluttershy smiled.
I'm just happy we're getting to Celestia, and we're all together.
Applejack grunted.
Ugh. Hungry and tired, but this ain't nothing compared to the day of apple bucking. I'll get us some food tomorrow morning.
Pinky King!
Glad Pinky. Rainbow Dash was fast asleep on a flat rock, her head resting on her front hooves. Occasionally her wings flapped gently, as if she were dreaming of flying. Well then, tomorrow we set off again, so let's get a good night's sleep. Good night, everybody. Pew! Twilight's swelling horn dimmed until the cave was pitch black and echoed with the sounds of snoring. Applejack slung her bag over her back and stepped gingerly over to the sleeping Rarity. Not an easy task, since it involves avoiding the multiple layers of blankets that she had packed. Oh, so we're going to get some apple... No! Bad Shepherd! She made her way out of the cave's entrance into the clearing, the skies already brightening from the sun just below the horizon. I could see the Luna's doing her job, she thought. Alrighty, apple trees, where y'all headed? She wandered along the beaten path she discovered outside the clearing. After about 20 minutes, she stopped and snacked on some berries from the bushes lining the trail. I gotta say, if apples ever go out of style, I'm going to get into the berry business. But then I have to change my name. Berry Jack. Nah, I think I'll stick to apples. Why am I always so funny when no ponies around to hear it? She trotted on once more, enjoying her own company. Of course, she always preferred to be with her friends, but the farm pony knew the value of time spent alone. After another 5 minutes of walking, an apple tree appeared just off the trail. She fought through the tough underbrush and had 8 apples in her bag as quickly and easily as only an apple expert can. She turned back to the trail. Or was it the other way? She retracted her steps from the apple tree, trying to orient herself. I came from, this way, if I could just see the sun through the trees, but I'll remember that route.
Applejack's been gone for an awfully long time, don't you think, Twilight?
Fluttershy asked, trying to appear calm, but failing miserably. I'm sure there's nothing to worry about. Applejack can take care of herself. And besides, she's only been gone for half an hour, I think. She's probably just slowed down from all the apple seeds bringing back. Rarity shifted uncomfortably, as if considering whether to speak or not.
Twilight, I think she's been gone longer than half an hour. She stepped on me on her way out, and that was at least an hour ago. I could tell because the sun wasn't even up yet. Oh no, 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 no. We had to do something.
Fluttershy was pacing around the cave. I'm on it! Death spread her wings and began running toward the mouth of the cave when Pinkie Pie stepped in front of her.
Oh, no, you don't! We can't lose you too. My granny told me that when somebody is lost, you should never split up, or everybody else will get lost too. But you already scared us by flying into this cave last night.
But Pinkie, Daz reasoned, I could just fly up above the trees and look for her. I have to have her back. I have her back in 10 seconds. Twilight walked up to the two friends, thinking,
Dash,
I think the tree covers is too thick for you to be able to see through. And besides, those apple trees I saw on our way here were very far away. It'd take an hour or two to go there and back. And Pinkie's right. There's no way we're letting you run off too. Either we wait here for her a little longer, or we all go out searching together. She looked at her four friends, trying to muster up hope. And besides, she's probably fine. She'll walk in here any minute with a bag full of apples for us. The look on her friends said enough. You're right. We'll head looking at right now. I can only hope she's okay. Applejack grunted as she forced herself through a particularly thick netting of branches. The clearing on the other side brought her relief, but only a little. She was still hopelessly lost, and probably even farther from the cave than when she was at the apple trees. But she didn't think she could have wandered for more than an hour or two. But the terrain seemed to be drastically changing at an impossible rate. The thick forest was beginning to give way to cold, rocky slopes, almost as she were here in the mountains. She sat down in the middle of the clearing, thinking while munching on an apple. I'll soon listen to what Graham Smith always said. If you're lost, stay put. Darn you, Applejack. You're so stubborn. You just had to go wander off and get even more lost, didn't you? Twilight! Rainbow Dash! Rarity! Fluttershy! Pinkie! She called out, and immediately wished she hadn't. The echo of her yell was the most lonesome sound he had ever heard. A wind began stirring up the branches of the thinning trees. In the clearing, she finally had a clear view of the sky. Could the sun really be that far down? How long had it been? Almost a whole day. Was it possible? The moon had already risen, preparing for its nighttime solo. The clearing also allowed her a clearing view of the area around her. In one direction, endless trees. That was the way she had come. In the other direction, rocky peaks. Was there really a mountain range so near a forest? She hadn't remembered seeing any mountains along the journey yesterday. Can't sleep in the forest. Too dangerous. If I could find a mountain cave, perhaps. Her thoughts broke off as a brilliant red beam of light erupted out the nearby mountainside, streaking vertically through the air into the endless heavens. Where it met the sky, the clouds swirled around it, as if trying to avoid a foreign intruder. The ground beneath her began to tremble, the surrounding trees creaking in their foundation as if groaning in protest. Before she had time to process this, she yelped at a pain on her side. Her pack had grown incredibly hot. She quickly flung it off. It began moving toward the ground. At first, she could only stare, dumbfounded by the bizarre series of events that had occurred in the past 10 seconds. She broke out of her bewilderment and started chasing after the bag. However, as it neared the ends of the cave clearing and almost out of her sight.
Applejack! Applejack! Twilight called. Rainbow Dash, now that we're all out here together, go ahead and fly above the branches and tell us what you see.
Rainbow Dash saluted and exploded through the tree line.
See anything?
Just lots and lots of trees, responded Dash, who came back through the hole she had made in the canopy. Rarity sat next to Pinkie Pie, deep in thought.
Twilight, why not send up a magical flare? Maybe Applejack could see it and find her way back to us.
Excellent idea. Twilight bent down in concentration, mustering up as bright of a burst as she could achieve. She unleashed it all at once. The purple beam penetrated the tree line as though it were glass, and continued up the sky above.
Ooh, pretty,
exclaimed Pinkie.
Fluttershy looked up, but her expression never shifted from worry.
Let's hope she saw it.
As the earthquake finally died out, Applejack caught up with the bag, which had entered the thinning trees on the other side of the clearing. She anxiously pinned it down with one hoof, unsure what to expect. The end of the bag bulged as if protesting its entrapment. Then she could feel it trying to force itself in the direction it had been going. Then realization struck.
It ain't the bag that's moving. Something's in the bag that's moving.
She grabbed a hold of the bag and twisted her grasp like a captured animal. She cautiously opened the flap, unsure what to expect. Inside were the remaining apples. They were glowing. No,
Tain't the apples that are glowing.
she took out each apple until the only item left in the bag was her fragment of the rose, which pulsated madly with green light. She gingerly poked it, then thrust her burnt hoof into the mouth. It was still pushing madly in the direction of the thinning trees, the direction of the towering beam of light, which, though still visible, had begun to fade. Applejack rubbed her burnt hoof to her head and thought, well, I ain't got nothing to go on but this, so I suppose I don't have much of a choice. She cautiously placed the rose fragment back in the bag, pushing it quickly to avoid the heat, then put the apples on top of it to weigh the bag down. While gently gripping the thrashing bag in her mouth so as to let it guide the way without escaping, she continued off into the sparse trees, heading into the direction of the mountains, the direction of the rose, and the direction of the beam. Though she never noticed it, another beam of light, this one purple, erupted through the tree line far behind her, back beyond the thick forest she had just come from.
Phew!
Applejack said, her voice muffled by the pack in her mouth, which was pulling her along in the direction of the fading beam.
Not sure where you're all taking me, but this better be good. I worked all day yesterday and all day today, and now I'm working some more.
Suddenly, the situation seemed pretty grim.
Oh boy, now I'm thinking about it. We sure worked a hit a distance yesterday, and I think I'm getting even farther today. You'll better be taking me to civilization, Rose, or I'm in a heap of trouble.
But Doctor, I am taking you the right way.
Wrong Rose.
She sighed once more upon realizing she was conversing with an inanimate object. It had been about 20 minutes since the enormous beam appeared. With the rose's guidance, she had been nearing its source, though it had faded beyond the point of visibility. The forest had given way to the mountains incredibly fast. Unnaturally fast. Rose suddenly began tugging harder than ever. She clenched her mouth even tighter, following her lead. At this point, she realized she was technically in the mountains, gaining altitude, the trees shrinking beneath her. The rose seemed to be following a thin ridge of a trail that climbed along the mountainside. She continued along this trail for another 10 minutes, until she rounded a winding corner and finally saw the source of a beam, a mountain cavern. The dying glow somehow escaped through the cavern's rock ceiling. To alleviate the ache in her tired mouth, she quickly dropped the pack and slung it across her back, latching it tightly. The rose was pulling with such force, it seemed possible it would rip clean through its felt prison. Walking with it attached to her mouth was difficult, though it was still easier than holding it in her mouth. The dark hole in the mountain seemed to glare at her as she approached it. She realized it was lit, dimly, but still lit. If I'm going to find some pony to help me out, I suppose this is the place. But if I want to find some pony who wants to cook me a stew, I suppose this is also the place. She gulped, suddenly feeling extremely uneasy, and carried on. Almost there. Finally, almost there. The previous estimation of distance had turned out to be horribly wrong. For about 20 minutes she traveled, though the cavern never seemed to grow closer. Eventually, though, with the guidance of the rose fragment tugging on from within the bag on her back, she reached the final stretch. A thick trail bordered by the evenly placed boulders sloped up before her, leading directly into the cavern, which was still lit. Now she could see the light was a flickering red. The beam had earlier torn through the sky and had completely faded. At this moment, Applejack realized how hopelessly separated from her friends she had become.
What's calling to me? Why I traveled this far? I was only an hour away from our cave, and I had to go and decide to walk half across the Equestria. Why, follow this good-for-nothing Rose!
Although she hadn't shed a tear since she was a homestruck filly in Manhattan, she could feel them coming on now. In fact, she felt almost exactly like that young filly in Manhattan, alone and isolated from everything she loved. If I only had a sign like Dazzle's rainbow to guide my back, like I did back then, she thought. Well, I suppose I came all this way. Don't have much of a choice but to face what I start, do I? She continued up the foreboding path towards the lip of the cavern. If she hadn't been a rodeo girl, the pack bucking urgently on her back would have knocked her down, though it had begun to calm itself. Eventually, she reached the top and could see inside. The cavern was smaller than she had expected, just larger than Twilight's library. It was lined with 6 towering columns, though 2 had crumbled into mounds of debris. One of those mounds was still glowing, faintly with a bitter red light. The only other object in the cave was the altar in the center. A slight red roar danced along its edges like flames. Applejack froze, paralyzed with horror. Upon the altar lay Princess Celestia. Though she wasn't physically restrained, it seemed she could only move her head a fraction. "Run," the princess said. Applejack wasn't sure if she heard this aloud or in her head, but she didn't care. "Princess!" It was all she could think of saying. Celestia turned weakly to her left. Applejack followed her glance, as he noticed an open doorway on the cavern wall. Beyond it moved a shadow, clearly that of a pony. "Run!" Applejack hesitated a moment, staring into the princess's pleading eyes. She could see them in fear, but also a glimmer of hope. Then she ran. She ran out the horrible cavern chamber, down the boulder-lined pathway, back along the cliff ridges that had brought her to the evil den, back through the trees of the clearing. She ran and ran. At one point she looked back. The mountains were gone. Not out of sight, but actually gone. Where moments ago stood their towering mountain range, now only flat forests. She continued running, the bag bouncing against her back. It no longer struggled. "Oh, it's no use," Twilight sniffled. "She's either too far away to hear us, or—" She couldn't finish the thought. Nearby, Pinkie Pie, Rainbow Dash, and Fluttershy were launched in a tight embrace. "I'm sure she'll come back," Dash comforted her. Twilight walked over to the group. "Dash, you said you'd leave and search for her. Are you still willing to do that?" Dash nodded grimly.
No! We can't lose you too.
Rarity joined the group.
Twilight, one last try. Just once more, please.
Twilight nodded and gave herself some room. Her horn glowed as she mustered up the last of her strength, pouring it all into one final attempt. The beam shot up through the trees, and for a moment purple daylight reigned for miles. Then it was over. Applejack ran. The world erupted into light. Through the treetops she saw the pillar of light, triumphing over the forests, directly in front of her. Though her experience with beams this evening had been awful to say the least, the familiarity of this purple one brought her some warm comfort. She kept running. After 20 minutes of waiting, Rainbow Dash trod solemnly to Twilight. "So, should I go now, or should we wait until daylight? I think—" She cut off as Applejack tore through the tree line.
Applejack!
Twilight and Dash cried as Pinkie, Rarity, and Fluttershy turned around in bewilderment. Applejack collapsed to the ground and was immediately surrounded by her 5 friends. "Give her room!" The others backed off reluctantly. Twilight approached Applejack, wiping a tangled mane from her eyes, which were still closed. "Applejack, can you hear me?" Though her eyes never opened, Applejack spoke as clearly as she were conversing with Twilight about apple bucking. "There were once 6, but now there are 4. The first 2 have fallen." Chapter 5.
Blank flank, blank flank, blank flank!
The unrelenting tears weighed down upon him, pushing him lower and lower to the dirt ground until his face was hidden beneath his hooves. The air wavered with the heat of the midday sun. Beyond the field, the schoolhouse, which now seemed to be furlongs away and still retreating, could have no more been than a mirage. One of the more focal bullies stuck closer to the shrinking black unicorn. "The new foal doesn't even have his cutie mark. Blank flank, no mark, flanks as blank as he is dark." The rest of the circle took up the chant. "Blank flank, no mark, flanks as blank as he is dark." Lying there on the floor of the schoolyard, surrounded by his new schoolmates, something broke within Thade. Okay, I need to stop here. I just got off watching Cloudy Roman Chance of Meatballs, and now through all this, all I can think of is the not clever insult chance that Sam had to deal with. Four eyes, you need glasses to see. Sorry. My apologies. I just love that movie. How could he lay there, carrying beneath his hooves, and allow him to become the mockery of these awful fillies and colts? He could not let this become his first impression of this new town, not after what happened in the last one. The neck, he thought, singling out the largest earth pony who was clearly the ringleader. If I go for the neck, he'll be down for good. Then I'll show him, just like that book you read. Don't just hit back. Hit back hard. Hit back so hard they'll never cause you trouble again. Deep down, though, he knew he could never do it. Thoughts. Meaningless thoughts. That's all they were. Maybe if I just lay down like this, they'll get bored and...
Hey! Leave him alone!
The filly's shout came from the same direction as the ringleader's chant. Thade peered up from beneath his hooves. The jeering slowed to a grumbling shout, becoming excited whispers. He saw the circles of his tormentors split apart to allow room for the newcomer. Look who's here. We were wrong, new cult. Not only you're not the only blank flank, we forgot about Krashka, just like her parents did.
Oh, please, you think that still bothers me? I'd rather have no parents than to go home to yours. Every pony knows about your father, Bucksaw, about what he did.
Thade's vision of his rescuer was blocked by Bucksaw's large figure, which was now suffocatingly, agitatingly from hoof to hoof. I don't know what you're talking about, Bucksaw grumbled, glancing around nervously.
Oh, you don't? Maybe, should I remind you? Maybe there are still some ponies in your crowd here who haven't heard that story. Or you could apologize and I don't have to say anything. For a tense moment there was silence. Then, sorry. The word was filled with such monstrous anger that Thade's head once more found itself buried beneath his hooves. He listened as the crowd dispersed. After he was sure it was gone, he glanced up tentatively, curious to see his savior for the first time. The gray Pegasus was smiling slightly and looking directly at him. For a moment there was silence, though it was in no way awkward. Within it, volumes seemed to be shared between them.
I'm Laska,
the Pegasus finally said. Thane threw himself to his hooves, standing upright. There was another stretch of silence as he stared up at her. He had been told about the Pegasi, about the cloud ponies, but he had never actually seen one up close. She was a filly, probably about the same age as he, and watching with him with concerned bemusement. As he stared, a slight breeze picked up. One of her wing feathers floated to the ground. He wasn't sure why, but as he watched it fall, he was sure it was the most beautiful sight he had ever seen. She was molting! And her flank was indeed blank. The quiet continued for another few moments. Finally,
Thade. I'm Thade.
Silence reigned once more, but silence was wonderful. Then he would never want to hear another sound ever again. The school bell rang, and they both jumped, turned to watch as the rest of the small young ponies fled into the building. Laska turned to Thade. The smile between them felt like a secret. She began trotting toward the schoolhouse. He followed, but stopped long enough to pick up the feather from the ground. With nowhere to put it, he reluctantly teleported it off to his bedroom, so he would cherish it later. If any pony took the time to ask him how he could perform such complicated magic at a young age, he would have stared back in confusion. He knew he was talented. Of course he was talented. He had nothing better to do than practice when he got home from school. But he had never expected that he was more than talented. That imbued within him was a natural skill to rival that some of the most fantastic unicorns in history. No, in Thade's own mind, he simply had a lot of time on his hooves. The power within him, though enormously immense, was still mostly dominant, untapped, immature. Time would cure that, for now. Thade was an extremely talented foal who didn't realize his own ability. He picked up his pace, catching up with his new friend. They entered the schoolhouse side by side.
What do you think, Fluttershy?
Twilight asked, anxiously watching as the yellow Pegasi did her work. The cave echoed with the sounds of her very delicate motion.
Will she be okay?
Fluttershy was hunched over the sleeping Earth pony, applying a salve that she had created for nearby pants and bandaging several minor cuts. She scratched up.
And probably very sore. But with some rest, she should be walking in no time.
Twilight breathed a sigh of relief.
Thank goodness.
Do you think she'll wake up soon? We've got to get moving, but more important, we need to find out what happened to her. Fluttershy stood up, glancing protectively at Applejack.
I'm not sure when she'll wake up. Whatever happened to her, she ran a long way. She just needs sleep.
Is there anything I can do to help? Twilight begged. Fluttershy returned to her kneeling position.
She just needs peace and quiet. Why don't you go outside and let the others know she's okay? I still have some work to do.
Twilight nodded. She began heading for the cave's exit, but stopped. She turned back.
Fluttershy?
Fluttershy glanced up constantly. Thanks for helping us with her, Twilight said. We wouldn't know the first thing to do if you weren't here. Fluttershy beamed.
Of course. I can never ignore somebody in need. Especially a friend.
Twilight returned to smile, then headed for the clearing outside the cave, where her friends awaited news. Rainbow Dazzle was in Twilight's face before the unicorn's eye could adjust to the bright sunlight.
Will Fluttershy let us go in and see her? Is she okay? Is she awake yet?
Rarity was right beside her, eagerly awaiting Twilight's response.
She's going to be fine. She just needs some sleep and peace.
I knew she'd be okay. Applejack can overcome anything. Rainbow Dazzle, her worry now melted, laughed with relief. Rarity wrapped a hoof around Rainbow's neck.
That is such a relief. But I can't say I'm surprised. Applejack is as tough as they come.
She bucked an invisible tree behind her to express her friend's strength. The odd spectacle tentacled danced into another burst of laughter. Rarity turned away haughtily, but then began chuckling to herself, until both the Pegasus and Unicorn were rolling around the ground laughing. Twilight smiled to herself. They may be surrounded by peril, their journey far from over. But being here with her friends, it was impossible to stay troubled for too long. Then she realized he was forgetting some pony.
Where's Pinky?
Rarity went back to her hooves, and finally got, overcoming the giggles, leaned into Twilight, whispering secretly,
She's having one of her moods. She says she just wants to be alone.
Twilight gasped.
Oh no.
Rarity, Dash, you two should know that when she says she wants to be alone, she needs us more than ever. We have to find her, now! Dash and Rarity looked at each other guiltily. Twilight's right, Dash said. You two didn't see her back at her house before her surprise party. It wasn't pretty. They split up, each walking along the perimeter of the clearing, searching for the path their friend had taken. After only a few moments, Rarity called out softly,
Psst! Here!
Dash and Twilight arrived next to her. Before them began a fresh, hastily beaten trail. The sound of sobbing could be heard in the distance. There was silence as the three looked at each other with worry. Twilight bit her lip in distress. She began down the path, her two friends near her rear. As they walked, the sobbing grew louder. He was almost within sight of the source. Suddenly it stopped. For a moment the forest was quiet, save for a distant bird song.
What are you doing here?
The bare resentment in Pinky's voice cut through the brush like a forest of knives. Instead of responding, Twilight, Rarity, and Rainbow Dash took the final few steps. Suddenly she came into view. She was sitting with her back to them, her head held low. To their horror, her hair was indeed completely deflated, hanging over her like a shroud.
Let me guess.
She sniffled, her back still to them. Her voice drifted with self-resentment.
You're all here to yell at me for getting Applejack hurt, and to tell me that we're not friends anymore after what I did, because it's all my fault. Stupid dumb Pinkie Pie had to go eat all the apple sandwiches, and so Applejack had to go get food, and then something terrible happened to her, and it's all my fault, and go ahead and yell at me. I deserve it. Stupid Pinkie had to...
She was interrupted by Dash enveloping her a hug. Pinky, you're being stupid. It's only for thinking we don't like you anymore. Come on, snap out of it. You know we'll always be friends no matter what. Pinky just sniffled, her hung still head low. She didn't return the hug. Rarity joined in, adding herself to the embrace.
Darling, it's not your fault. It was all just an accident. Whatever happened, no pony blames you.
Twilight's turn. With her, the embrace became a group hug. However, Pinky, though squished by her friends, showed no reaction.
Pinky,
Twilight said,
whatever happened to Applejack is over. It wasn't your fault. Besides, she's going to be fine. Fluttershy says she only needs some rest and...
The three friends surrounding Pinky were flung away as she leapt into the air.
Twilight!
She said, her hair beginning to return to its normal disheveled state.
Did you say she's gonna be okay? Is she really?
Twilight picked herself off the ground and turned to her pink friend, smiling.
That's what Fluttershy said, and if anybody knows, it's Fluttershy.
Some of Pinky's joy seemed to drain away again as she looked down at her host.
And you guys really don't hate me? Of course not, darling. How could we ever...
Are you kidding, Pinky? Rainbow Dash is loyal to the end.
Pinky, we never hate you. Don't you ever think that.
This time it was Pinky who grabbed her friends into a tight hug.
Thanks, guys.
Dash grinned. That's the Pinkie Pie I know and love.
Wait,
Twilight said.
did any of you hear that?
Hear what? I didn't hear... Shh. Rarity put her mouth to her urgently. He sat frozen in her hug, listening.
Twilight, I still don't... Twilight! Rainbow Dash! Pinkie Pie! Rarity!
The distant yell was coming up from the path. Fluttershy? Twilight said. Come on, girls! This must have something to do with Applejack. Without another word, the four friends set off back down the trail.
Twilight! Rainbow Dash! Pinkie Pie! Rarity!
Fluttershy broke off as the four ponies burst out of the woods and into the clearing.
Oh, thank goodness. Applejack's awake and she wants to talk to all of us. Where were you?
Pinkie Pie turned away, embarrassed. We were just going to pick Applejack some flowers. We didn't find any, though. Now, come on, let's hear what she has to say. Fluttershy, confused, guided her friends to the cave. Though Twilight's eyes took a few minutes to adjust to the darkness, she found her way to Applejack with ease. The cavern's layout had etched itself into her mind. She was sitting up against the stone wall, covered by one of Rarity's blankets. Her orange coat appeared to glow from the warm candlelight of the same color. Remarkably, her scrapes and bruises were already fading. It appeared as though whatever struggles she had overcome happened weeks ago. Twilight took a moment to reflect once more upon how lucky they were to have Fluttershy. The moment Applejack saw her purple unicorn friend, she shot up earnestly. Twa! I was there! I saw her! Unhide him! She was nearly hysterical. The pros took me there, and it was how, and the ground was, it was a shaking, and the red beam of light came, something bad happened. I just know it, but Twilight, I saw her as he told... Applejack, slow down. We're here for you. Just relax and tell us what happened. Pinky, Dash, Rarity finally made their way to the dark cave where Applejack lay, with Fluttershy and Twilight at her cave. The five waited anxiously while she took deep breaths and collected herself. Well, she began, yesterday morning I woke up early to get us some food. I went down the path to the apple trees we saw. I about settled down to try to make my way back to this cave, but I got lost. The five friends stood around her, listening as she incredulously told her tale, beginning to end, never skipping a single detail. They shuffled nervously from hoof to hoof as he waited for somebody to open the door. He had very little experience with this sort of thing, and something about her always made it difficult for him to think. In a nice way. With a wooden creak, the door opened, and suddenly before Thady stood a red Pegasus stallion. He glared down at Thady through square spectacles.
Yes? What is it?
His voice was gruff and impatient, as if Thady was expecting something very important. Is Laska home, sir? It was just as awkward to make eye contact as it was to avoid it. So Thady compromised and met the stallion's eyes only briefly and occasionally. Instead of responding, the Pegasus let out a burly yell.
Laska! Stop us here!
He then shut the door. Thade stood alone on the porch, uncertain how to proceed. The thud, thud, thud of the intimidating stallion's hostess died away behind the door. Well, I guess I could come back again later, or talk to her tomorrow during school. He thought, but I've been planning this for days, and I haven't had a real conversation with her since the day in the yard. I can't put off saying thanks for that long. Another moment of thinking, waiting, he resigned resignedly, turning to leave, when once more the sound of hostess floated towards him behind the door. The new pattern was delicate and soft, not the thud 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 of a stallion, but a as if the floorboards were silently contently.
The door opened. Oh, hi, Thade. Good to see you. How did you find out where I live?
Thade got the urge to simply stare at her. It was in the student directory, and I was thinking, are you busy right now? She crossed through the doorway, closing it behind her and joining Thade and the parts.
Not at all.
Well, follow me. She smiled back clearly, followed her as he led her down the road.
So I see you met my Uncle Bale.
First name Kristen? Oh, I should have used my Batman voice.
He's very, very forward, but nice once you get to know him.
Thade laughed. He found himself laughing a lot more frequently since meeting her a few days ago. maybe I will get to know him.
Maybe.
Asuka smiled.
So, you're new in town? Where did you move from?
Thade began nervously. I moved here from a town called Martingale. Asuka waited for him to continue, but Thade remained silent.
Well, why did you move?
Thade turned to look at her. This was it. It was a fresh town, a fresh start. He was speaking with the most amazing pony he had ever met. There was just no time for lying or hiding behind his past. I had some trouble in Martingale. I've never been very good at making friends. Other fillies and colts avoided me. Then I got into a fight in the schoolyard.
You got into a fight?
Well, no, I didn't do anything. There was this bully, and he
beat you up, and so your parents moved you here?
They looked up at the sky, as if to answer her question was in the serious, wispy crowds. Sort of. My parents, they don't really care about me. We moved here because the school said I couldn't go there anymore because of the fight. But my parents still have to send me to school, so we moved here.
Oh.
They walked in silence for several moments, the road becoming a path into the woods of increasing thickness. The cool, damp air was refreshing after traversing the town's held streets.
You should really learn to stick up for yourself,
Asuka finally said. Thade turned to her. What do you mean?
Well, you have to learn to fight back. When somebody comes at you, you go at him twice as hard.
She swung her hose at the air in front of her, as if sparring with an invisible foe. Thade watched in amazement. Fight your battles, Thade. I used to get picked on a lot because I don't have my cutie mark, and because my parents are around.
But the bullies don't bother me anymore because I'm going to hit back.
Thade was saved the trouble of thinking up a response. For they finally reached the destination. We're here.
Is this what you wanted to show me?
Asuka asked dubiously. Before them stood a half-collapsed wooden shed. It stood off just above the trail, almost invisible behind the trees and bushes. Asuka wouldn't see it if Thade hadn't mentioned it. It was about 10 hooves tall, with enough room to hold perhaps 2 fully grown ponies. Asuka could tell even from the outside that the roof was now in the process of caving in. They disappeared to the forest next to the shack.
Come on!
Asuka nervously struggled through the gap in the bush branches, making room with her wings. Once, though, she discovered that the shack was on the border of a tiny clearing. Thade was tugging on both hooves on the door handle. Asuka watched, amused, as he lifted his hind hooves off the ground and began pushing them against the shack for assistance. An audible creak startled them both, but the door didn't move. Thade sighed. A look of concentration swam across his face, and his horn began glowing with a black aura. The same aurora appeared around the door, and was burst open with a thud.
There, he smiled. Go on in. Don't worry, it's perfectly safe. I promise.
She looked down for a moment, unsure, then smiled nervously. Stepping through the doorway, Thade went in after her, magically closing the door with a crack that sent nearby animals scattering. Inside,
Thade, I can't see anything.
A moment later, his horn glowed with a warm red light. Better? He asked. Asuka smiled and nodded.
You're very good with magic.
Thade blushed, glad that the red light would mask his heated face. I got started at a young age.
Why did you take me here? What is this place?
Well, have you ever seen cupcakes? She looked around the cramped place. To her surprise, the dirt floor wasn't uncomfortable. The place had a familiar, cozy feeling. This is just a special place of mine. I found it the day I moved into town. I like to come here and be alone, and it's quiet. Asuka nodded knowingly. She had a special place of her own. But this isn't all what I wanted to show you, he said. She turned to him in surprise.
What do you mean?
He was silent for a moment, gathering his words.
Laska, we've only been friends for a short time, but you trust me, right? Of course.
Thade smiled. Put your wing around me. Laska stared down for a moment in bewilderment, then wrapped a small wing gently across his back. His horn began to glow. His face contorted with absolute concentration. To Laska's astonishment, the shack around them began to fade to blackness, ever so slightly. It returned, then began fading again, more so this time, until the world around them was a horrifying empty nothingness. They were then into the shack once more, then suddenly, with a burst of stars and smoky black sparks, the shack was gone. A field. They were in a field. The most fantastic sight Laska had ever seen. It was a field of roses. They grew endlessly in every direction, upon rolling hill and sprawling flat plain. Each slight breeze caused rolling waves of red and green in every direction. The petals danced through the air like a vibrant snow. The sound of the roses brushing against each other in the breeze was like the calm inhale and exhale of the ocean.
A Thade?
It was all she could say. He didn't respond.
Thade? Thade!
He was struggling to get off to the ground to his hooves. She grabbed him gently and held him up.
Are you okay?
Thade groaned, finally standing on all fours. I'm fine, he said. I've never teleported myself and another pony before. He looked around smiling. What do you think?
It's incredible.
They marveled at the colorful sea. Solanso, he said, the field of roses. I read of this place in a book. I was just a tiny colt, but when I saw the picture, I knew I had to come here. So I began practicing magic, teleportation, and I got better at it. Room to room in my house, one side of town to the other. Farther and farther. Just like any good unicorn, really. But to teleport somewhere, you must know where the place is. The book couldn't say. So I read others. I searched for this place in every library I could find. Just finally found its location in an old book of legends. Just above Spurdock. I come here sometimes when I feel like being alone. She embraced him, pulling him close under her wing.
Thade, you're amazing.
This time, there was no light to cover his blush. Hours passed, or minutes. Laska wasn't sure how long they had been laying there, talking, watching the red waves roll in, watching the green waves roll out, hearing the calm rustle of the roses. Thade was saying something, but her mind had become occupied by a thought.
Thade, you can get us back, right?
Of course, he smiled. It's not easy to teleport twice in such a short amount of time, but I've had a lot of practice. She grinned, relieved, nuzzling closer to him. Somehow, the sky was just as magnificent with the roses beneath it. The red snow of petals never ceased. The fragrance was now the finest bouquet.
What were you saying?
Thade said nervously, Well, you haven't told me about your parents. About what happened to them.
Oh.
Lying in this field, there was no secret she was willing to keep. Nothing between them she would dare mention.
They passed away. On a train. In an accident. I was at Uncle Bale's. I was very young. I don't remember it.
She looked away so he wouldn't see the pain on her face. I'm so sorry to hear that. The sincerity in his voice brought tears to her eyes. She wiped away, smiling weakly at the sky. Laska?
Hmm?
She rolled on her side to face where he lay next to her. In his hooves he held a rose, picked from one of the billions in the field. She stared at him, her mouth agape, then slowly, delicately took it from his hooves. She stared at it, transfixed by its perfection, its purity and fragility. She embraced him for the second time. No words passed as they lay together on the floor. Her hooves and wings around him, his hooves around her, the waves whispering indecipherable chants from every direction. After a moment, Thade gasped.
Laska, look!
She followed her eyes to his flank. There was no longer bare. Once there was only gray, there was now the image of a rose, as immaculate and beautiful as the one still had in her hoof. She turned to him in wonder and guessed for herself. Thade followed her eyes and saw that his flank was no longer bare. The identical mark, the everlasting rose, appeared on his as well. He pulled her close, squeezing her tightly. She returned the favor. She pet his cheek with a kiss, and they laid there, two falls in love, young love, the purest of all, while the fabled roses of Silenzo watched around them, silently, contentedly. Rainbow Dash was the first to break this stunned silence. "You were actually there? You were actually at the Spring of Magic?" Applejack nodded vigorously. "I know it sounds crazy, but it's true. I saw Celestia, and I saw him, that twisted pony." She spit the last words out in fiery anger. Fluttershy spoke up, softly but surely.
Don't worry, Applejack. We believe you.
"Oh, thanks, Fluttershy. Oh, thanks for fixing me up so good. I actually haven't felt better in ages." She winked at the yellow Pegasus. Twilight's voice was sharp and serious. "Applejack, you said something after you fell over. Something about numbers. There were once 6, but now there are 4, if I remember correctly. What did you mean?" Applejack rubbed her chin and thought. "Well, I don't recollect saying that. Once were 6. She thought for a moment later, then gasped a realization. "The pillars! That's what I must have meant. I didn't get a fair look at 'em, but I saw the cavern was lined with 6 pillars, except 2 of them were nothing more than piles of rubble." "Pillars," Twilight mused. "I'm not really sure what—"
First the pillars must fall.
Fluttershy mumbled. Twilight turned to her. "What, Fluttershy?"
Oh, it's nothing.
Fluttershy stared at her expectantly. Then everyone inside went on.
It's... My mother used to sing to me when I was a small filly. I think she heard it from my father. That's why I liked it so much. I never did. I always thought it was a horribly sad song. I think it went like this."
She began singing, her voice sweet and angelic. The melody was beautiful, yet eerily haunting, like an old and worn music box.
To the paramount spring a relic you must bring. Oh, one is lost, but now lost. Pray of ultimate cost. To break through the wall, first the pillars must fall. Retying the tether that bounds the worlds together. To finish the deed, to reveal the portal, you will finally need blood of an immortal.
Verity gasped.
Don't you see? We already know that the pony is trying to raise the dead. This makes perfect sense. These pillars of ours, they must be what stand between him and his goal. And he's already destroyed 2 of them. And he needs the princess for...
She couldn't finish the thought. Pinkie Pie grabbed her in a comforting hug.
I don't know how I didn't see it before,
Fluttershy said.
I guess it's so obvious now. I never imagined the spring in the song was actually the spring.
Twilight began pacing around her friends. "So, he's probably trying to raise the dead. Needs Celestia. That's why he took her. He probably already has the relic, and the pillars have already begun to fall. And you, Applejack, were there." Applejack nodded glumly, shuddering at the memory. Twilight, asserting her role as leader, looked at each of her friends, one by one. "We should look on the bright side. Applejack managed to find the spring, so we can too. Also, it seems that the rose will help guide us. We know that Celestia is okay, and that there are still 4 pillars left." She smiled at her friends before her. Though the sun was setting, its low position in the sky lit the cave more brightly than any other hour of the day. "So, what do you say? Tomorrow we'll head out again. This time we'll try a little harder to get lost." They shared a small laugh, and Twilight felt instantly better, though something about Applejack's recount caught her fuzz with unease. It was more than Celestia's sorry state, more than the fall of pillars. She pushed the matter back to her mind. "We'll be able to do it. I know it." Outside, the sky was painted a fantastic mixture of orange and red, and the forest became as silent as the twinkling stars that had begun appearing one by one.
We could come back sometime, can't we?
Laska was staring longingly about the endless field. They smiled reassuringly. "Of course. Here, put your wing around me." She did so, brushing up closely against him.
I didn't need to know we need to be touching for you to teleport me.
He grinned. "We don't." She laughed.
I think I love him,
she thought, repeating the words in her head over and over, reveling in them.
I really do. I love him.
Thade's face contorted with concentration. His horn glowed back once more, and the world began falling and dark into nothingness.
I love him.
The field returned, then dissolved once more, receding as the blackness took over.
I love him.
She turned to him, his features still absorbed in concentration. She pecked his lips with a kiss. His eyes burst open in surprise, and he looked at her, wanting to stare into her eyes, to stare into those eyes so brave, so independent, so free. Everything he wasn't, and everything he loved. To show her he loved her too. Then everything began slipping. He fought to gain control of the spell. He only had a momentary lapse of concentration, but already he felt himself losing his grip. The black void lasted for eternity in every direction. He struggled to pull himself back to Silenzo, struggled to get their hooves on the ground. Laska glanced around nervously.
Thade?
His horn wasn't just glowing with magic, he was enveloped in it. He grunted with effort, and the field began to return. Come on, come on, come on! Oh dear Celestia, help me through this! For a moment, the ground reappeared beneath his hoof, and the delicate scent of the roses surrounded them once more. But the void was stronger. His vacuum of nothing grabbed at everything he could. He felt Laska's wing begin to slide off around him.
Thade!
She screamed, though her voice was muffled, if sound underwater. She couldn't waste energy returning her call. He pulled harder and harder, pulled with his entire being, pulled until he felt like he was being torn in two, until he could feel blood trickling slowly down his nose. But she continued slipping.
Thade!
Her wings slipped from his back. His vision blurred, her yells fading. The ground grew eagerly to meet him. In the fabled field of Silenzo, roses continued their ocean dance. The tide going in, and the tide going out.
Well, what a pair of two chapters, huh? Once again, I have to admit, I do love this little legend here. It's really nicely thought out and quite well done. I also like how the idea is to get lost, basically trying to pull yourself away from your quest. This allows for, some interesting parallels, and as you'll see in the next chapter, in the next live read, it's going to give the girls something interesting to think about. Another thing I have to admit I also liked is a little bit of this backstory. It's trying its best. It's making sure that Thade is not just a villain, but more of a villain with reasons. And you gotta love that. I also liked a little bit of his tragedy. He tried hard and he lost this young girl at a very young age when, he's just building up hormones. He's just starting to realize what love is, and now this girl's gone. Yeah, it's going to do something to him. It's going to mess him up hard. Asuka, I kind of wish we had more time with her. I mean, okay, so she's spunky. I kind of wish we had to know her. But still, this is a nice way of introducing us to the character. Well, join me next time as we find more about the Rose.